How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? My name is RuffledRowlit, and today I want to talk about, can Gamefreak make a good open world game with Scarlet and Violet? So this is a topic that I think a lot of people are very curious about, and I'm going to give you the answer, which is, well, yes and no. The first issue we're going to go into here is going to be about Gamefreak and their philosophy, which is that, as we've seen over the past decades of Pokemon existing, there's always been one underlying thread. Gamefreak loves to make Pokemon mainline games that are simple and straightforward. And what I mean by that is games that don't have too much deviation in what actually happens. The only time we've seen an actual deviation in them doing something in terms of their game development was most recently with Pokemon Legends Arceus. This was the first time where they genuinely gave us a little bit of freedom. But if you are going to be honest about it, even there wasn't 100% freedom. Instead, what we had was essentially multiple wild areas that were open for you to explore. And before that, we also had the Crown Tundra, which kind of gave us the same thing. However, with the Crown Tundra, it was on a smaller scale, and at the end of the day, the game there, or the DLC if you want to call it that way, was still just serving a very small purpose and kind of still putting you on a path to do certain things. But that's almost what we do want. So let's talk about this further. So, first issue. Pokemon gyms and how to organize them. If these games do bring back gyms, which is what most people seem to want with these games, as most don't seem to want to be seeing anything like similar to the Alola totems and kahunas and all that returning. A lot of people just want gyms back. If they do bring gyms back, how can they balance it, right? Like, if you have gyms, let's take it from Kanto. So if you look at, for example, Brock, his gym is pretty, bog standard. It's the first gym you take on. It is going to always be, within the game, the weakest gym for you to battle. Now, if we look from there, if you were to take on Brock, by the time that you have a Pokemon that's level 50, he's easily defeatable, right? Well, that's the problem, right? Because if you make gyms, so far in the past, they've always had to force us down a certain path, a certain set path, or else it would be almost impossible to balance things, at least from their perspective, right? Because making us go in a certain order for all the gyms basically also makes the story much easier to actually make. It's much easier to tell a story if everything goes in a straight line. If things deviate too much, or if there is freedom to go back and forth wherever you want, the story is much harder to tell. Which leads us to the second issue, HM roadblocks. This is something, and I mean, I say HM roadblocks, but just roadblocks in general. This is something Pokemon is well known for. They oftentimes put roadblocks in the way, things just block you for no particular reason, but it's all just there so that they can either tell their story or limit you from doing certain things because they want you to only do that later on. An example of this is Snorlax in Pokemon, either Red, Blue, within Kanto, or even Fire Red, Leaf Green. So why am I bringing up Snorlax? Well, Snorlax is a Pokemon that literally just lays in your way, okay? It just lays in your way as a roadblock to stop you from entering a certain area because the developers don't know any other way to stop you from going there. If the game had freedom, then you'd be just able to go there. But if you did that, then the game's consistency would get out of loop. The story wouldn't be told in the right way, the gyms wouldn't be done in the right way, and you might go to a gym that's too over-leveled for you or under-leveled for you in the wrong order. That's the problem. Things have always gone in a straight line. The first time we've seen an actual deviation in this, as I mentioned, has been with Legends Arceus. Legends Arceus was the first game where they decided to actually give us full-on, like, a different type of approach. And what is that approach? Well, basically, instead of focusing on the levels of our Pokemon and things of that nature, they instead focused on us completing these tasks, right? These multiple tasks to level up, insert, things. And by doing this, they kind of limit us, but also allow us to essentially level up almost like our Pokedex in that sense, to get to the next area. So we have to progress through the story, but our freedom is in these small zones. Well, not small, they're pretty big, but you basically get these zones of freedom where you can go around and explore, but at the end of the day, that isn't really open world. It isn't seamlessly open world. It isn't a place where you can really literally go from one place to another in whatever way you want to. It isn't really open world. It's still boxed in. You have essentially a game that is semi-open world. You have multiple areas that are big and sprawling. There is stuff there to do, but those areas aren't fully open world because you can't go from place to place without being stopped by something. You can't enter a certain zone until the story dictates it to go there. So that's kind of the issue. Now, the third issue. Now, the third issue is that it's kind of harder to tell a concise story. This is also why games such as Breath of the Wild's stories are kind of scattered and aren't really in any particular order. But Pokemon has always stuck to the idea that telling a concise story should be from point A to point B. And oftentimes, this means that they tend to force you down, well, certain paths, right? The few times we do actually have freedom in the older games, was kind of like only once in a while where we could essentially have a secondary path to go on rather than the standard straightforward path. But at the end of the day, that's such a minuscule amount of freedom if you really think about it compared to an open world game. If you think of an open world game, usually the way the story is told is through mini missions, like things you do, like, oh, go from this place to this place to this place. As an example, take GTA 5. In GTA 5, you have a main story and then, of course, side plots and things to do. You can always, if you want to in GTA 5, after finishing the intro sequence of the game, just not do anything related to the story ever again. Sure, it will leave certain things locked off. Certain aspects of the game will not be available. Certain areas might be slightly locked off, but for the most part, the whole world is open to you. The world is explorable. You can go from place A to place B to place C. Whatever you want to do, you can do it. That's kind of what makes it an open world game, right? If you want to go and steal a car, you can go steal a car. If you want to go, I don't know, do whatever you really want, you can do it. And that's what makes it open world and free. Pokemon can't really do that because imagine it like this. If you were able to instantly mount on and, surf on a Pokemon right away, then you could possibly go to a location that the developers don't want you to be at until a later point in the game. A location where you might find an item that's necessary for a different occasion within the story. And that's the problem. Pokemon has always relied on that idea of blocking you, roadblocking you, and forcing you to backtrack or do things of that nature to be able to progress within the story. So an example of this is in Pokemon Sword and Shield, if you want to get a Dragapult, you have to wait until the end of the game. You're not going to get it until the literally end of the game because most of the time it's locked off behind an island which you can't reach until you're able to quite literally surf over there. So that's the problem. They lock off things because that's an easier way for them to be able to keep the game from A to B. And this all comes down to the fourth issue, which is that they want to make sure that the whole experience stays consistent. And what I mean by this is that it's much easier to limit you in certain ways or block you off in certain ways and force you down certain ways by making certain areas limited in scope so that the story and the gameplay and everything stays consistent and is easier to develop. If we were to put it in this perspective, if we're making an open world Pokemon game and we want to include gyms, now how do we actually make the gyms work if there is a story around them? Like, let's say we take the original story from, the games that we've already played with Sword and Shield. If you're going to Balantlea, or whatever the city is called, where the Fairy-type gym leader is, we know that your rival does show up here, right? But here's the interesting thing. The rival kind of arrives to the Fairy-type gym to be a part of it, post, you defeating it and all that. But imagine now if that story element has to happen in an open world scenario, but your rival is a character that can, has to show up in certain areas. How is he supposed to show up there if, it doesn't stay consistent with where you are going? So if in the story it dictates that, oh, in this moment, this thing needs to happen, but meanwhile, you are on the opposite side of the map doing a totally different thing, then how is that going to work? It just doesn't match up well, which leads me down to the final point I'm going to make, which is that there is always hope. I mean, they have confirmed the game is open world. That means that the game will be open world. No questions asked. When they used to talk about Legends Arceus in interviews, they would never call it an open world game, and that was never a selling point of that game. With these games, Scarlet and Violet, they have put far more emphasis on it. So here's my prediction. I think we will have a fully open and explorable world in Scarlet and Violet, but certain areas will still be locked off to you. Like, they'll be locked off and you can't access them. These areas, I will say, will work in a similar way to Ganon in Breath of the Wild, which is a sort of place you can go to at any given time, but if you lack the skills at that time, you'll not be able to actually enter them. So a way to say it is like this. If you start the game off in your starting town or wherever it might be, from that point forward, you'll have to do the intro sequence and then you'll be free to go and explore. You'll have your first Pokemon, and have fun, right? But now, here's the thing. Yes, you can try to go to the final gym or even the Elite Four, but when you get there, there might be an issue. Oh, wait a minute. I don't have a Pokemon that can allow me to climb up here. Or, oh, hey, I can't get past here because there's trainers blocking the entrance that are super difficult to defeat, and no matter what I do, I can't get through. Maybe if I cheese it, I could, but it doesn't really matter because you have to go through and maybe talk to a certain character or do a certain story mission that will lead you down to a point where you can actually access that. So basically, weaving the story into the actual open world would be a good way to do it. Like essentially just having story elements that will kind of pop up throughout the world based on what you're doing. So if the main story has you going to, I don't know, do a certain quest or go and defeat an evil team member, that team member will always be in that location, but you don't have to go there and do that straight away. That's Pokemon's problem. They always force you to go do certain things right away. You never have the freedom to go around to other places and do other things, you know, instead of going straight to the story. No, you're always forced to go straight away to the story part and do the actual story in the game. Like, I'm playing Black and White right now, and I know for a fact that now I'm stuck and I can't move like anywhere unless I defeat a few of the Plasma Grunts. I have to defeat them for me to keep progressing through the game, and if I go back, I can only really explore the limited amount of space I've been through so far. And that's the thing. They can do that again. They can limit you, but in a better way, where you're still able to freely explore, just like in Legends Arceus, but bigger. That's the thing. It's going to be just like Legends Arceus, in my opinion, but in a bigger scale and actually open world. But your story and all those things and certain areas will still be locked off by you actually having to progress the story and do things that will give you access to certain Pokemon, to certain items, whatever it might be, to unlock those certain places that are a bit more difficult to achieve or get to. So that's what I think. Also, we can keep in mind that they could easily balance the gyms and allow you to go to any gym in any order by simply just having them scale up. So have a team that matches for every point you scale up. And of course, we do have the classic Pokemon limit, which is if you don't have a certain gym badge, then your Pokemon will just not obey you. And I think as a player, you will realize, wait a minute, maybe I should go do this gym or that gym or this gym or whichever gym first before I actually, try to use this Pokemon that's level 25, but I can only control Pokemon at level 24. So I hope you guys kind of get that. So my general point is this. I think they will be able to pull it off. I think that Legends Arceus has showed us that they can do something in that realm of open world. Maybe it wasn't full-on open world and it wasn't exactly what people expected, but it was close enough, and Crown Tundra showed us they can do it there too, so I think that Scarlet and Violet will be properly made open world, and I think they can do it. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, drop a like down below. I'll see you next one. Peace out, and bye-bye.